Welcome, dear responsible citizens and security enthusiasts, to our discussion on a guide which holds some valuable insight on sheltering in place preparedness. Mr. Jason Creek's The Disaster Ready Home. We were recently repeatedly recommended to include a discussion of the following book by several colleagues with security background. This, as the recent years have shown that in case of greater emergency, several states seem to have failed in even the most basic functions of disaster relief.
No one ever thinks it'll happen until it does.
While, for example, in the US, diverse environmental as well as industrial transport accidents were handled quite poorly, in Germany, the flood catastrophe in the Our Valley serves as latest example for justified shaming of officials to this day. All this should serve as cautionary examples why personal as well as corporate measures in crisis preparation and continuation planning should have a designated priority allocation in your budget.
Oh, let me just get one thing. It's my backup emergency supply kit. The living room escape route doesn't pass through here.
By acknowledging these however cost limitations of designated relief actors, by raising individual as well as organizational preparedness, one does not only take responsibility for oneself and one's own organization, but also one's environment, as it not only has up to means of survival, but also economic advantages, and especially it further enables to assist others in times of need. Something we will be discussing in the sister episode's business case on the so-called Waffle House Index. Further, we would like to stress that many civil protection agencies exist which advocate or even mandate a certain amount of civil individual preparedness, for which we take the German Agency of Civil Protection's recommendations guidelines, as well as docking templates as occasional example.
In here, you'll find emergency provisions, an 8-day supply of food and water, a crossbow, season 2 of Star Trek the original series on a high-density flash drive.
What if there's a disaster that destroys all the USB ports?
Then there's really no reason to live, is there?
As many, for example, noticed in times of mandated isolation at home in recent years, most of us are too used to being able to shop every other day, with very little perceived need to keep more than a very basic, if any, supply in foodstuffs. Due to us growing used to global year-round fresh produce supply chains, we could afford it. Yet the overabundance we have come to take as granted is for a large part of supply dependent on a complex network of global goods streams, which already operate on maximum and hide a very bleak consequential fact. Many sources agree that in the case of a collapse of infrastructure or anything affecting of our globalized supply chains, of which many go through highly politically tense choke points, even if only their local distribution capacities are impeded, as modern cities usually have only 7 to 10 days worth of calories available, 90% of the population would perish in a span of just 30 days. Which is why, for example, the German Federal Office for Civil Protection and Disaster Relief, Bundesamt für Bevölkerungsschutz und Katastrophenhilfe, recommends to be stocked up for at least 10 days, while states themselves possess strategic resource reserves in, for example, gasoline, with the German still holding basic carbohydrate supplies for nourishment of the population, while in China even a strategic pig meat reserve exists.
September 1941, Hitler's troops laid siege to Leningrad for 900 days, the blackest, most wretched misery in human history. You have any idea what happens to your body when starvation sets in? It shrinks. Heart and lungs compress, eyes, testicles, ovaries just shrivel up and wither away, and muscles devour themselves. Temperature falls, you freeze.
Why are you telling me this?
So our highly appreciated viewers hopefully never come into such a situation. We would in general like to invite you to open your mind when it comes to planning, as well as scenario anticipation, creation and simulation. As to give another short book example, historian and lecturer Max Brooks, whose zombie survival guide actually turned out to be leaned on for guidelines of preparedness by the US Center for Disease Control, CDC itself. There's an abundance of content available on such topics, yet the Blackout series, which also had a Swiss documentary produced, where even with Switzerland's highly sophisticated civil protection still losses are occurring, is something we can warmly recommend in this regard to further raise awareness. Yet now let's get to the actual book. For seasoned, responsible citizens and security professionals, we would like to point out that even to some of you, this book can definitely serve as a convenient offline summary, planning and application guideline, as it features much DIY picturing, to which we will come back in our closing remarks of part 2. The book is partitioned into 3 sections. First, food. Starting with food, the first section of the book provides an extensive guide for the very individual, up to on how to build their own pantry, process, preserve and store foodstuffs. From basic principles of needs calculation to detailed do-it-yourself illustrations, as well as a short take on raising chickens, gardening, applaudibly even cultivation basics, as this section covers it all, including an extensive guide on raising seedlings indoors, as well as many things related to conserving and storing food. Second, water. The second part concerns with water, a vital, if not most important aspect of crisis preparedness, which is why we think it should have been one number up in line. The book explains necessary aspects of collection, filtration and storage, incorporating practical advice on, for example, bleach treatment. This should be taken very seriously, as for example German Army MRE chlorine tablets are under no circumstances to be used in peacetime. The book correctly further emphasizes the critical elements of perishability and necessity of rotation to keep a reliable supply of clean water. To give a little outlook on our own contribution in part 2, near to no one focuses on what goes into the wastewater, therefore nature and consequentially us with microplastics for the first time being found in human blood recently. A still globe-wide waste filtration is insufficient when looking at it from a holistic problem-preventing aspirational view. Third, heating and sanitation, which are crucial components of emergency planning, especially if you happen to live in the northern hemisphere. Principles of cooking and, for example, building stoves are featured extensively, while also basics of generators up to bigger gas tanks, as well as smaller indoor heaters get touched on. Pro tip: barring new windows and a loss of heating capacity often gets underestimated. Most glass, which is only covered by blends, is still a fatal heating bridge and can achieve much if you actually not only board them up, but do what you can to isolate between the blend glass as well as your improvisation. Further, especially hygiene often gets underestimated in our times of perceived abundance and luxury. Yet to think about this is especially important if you intend to have any slight impression of comfort when, for example, a longer power outage occurs. Believers, you have to be a very rare kind of breed to be appreciating the fact that you are now expected to take care of your personal hygiene with a few wet wipes and, if you are lucky, a very limited amount of water each day. Not even touching on the joy of taking cold showers in cold conditions. Some of your fellows will resent and try going dirty upon realization. And such fast produces some kind of ailment or impededness. And such you can't afford neither in physical and especially in group psychological regards that the already most whiny now has an owie. P.S. Mr. Creek's illustration of a latrine trench should be considered only this, an illustration point, and it is clearly dug too shallow. Which is understandable considering it probably was done in his own garden, yet we didn't find the regarding note and therefore would like to stress this to close off as one of some minor improvement potentials. Summarizing, the author concludes: let go of perfection. Start small, maintain your plan, do live drills, and have, for example, the further provided online resources at the ready. Addition from our side: don't rely on online resources or something on a device at all, but print out and laminate them.
Are you actually printing something, Liam?
Yes, I'm gathering all of our necessary travel documents.
You know you can just do that on your phone, right?
It's better to have it than to need it.
And especially in regards of skills you haven't learned so far. Have books or other do-it-yourself guides available offline in case of, for example, long-term power outage and necessity of further improvisations, for which library we can definitely recommend this work by Mr. Creek. What you haven't learned until then, you should not plan assume to be able to grasp from a still working internet in a case of emergency. The book can be a great summary for beginners as well as such desk professionals, not having too much time for regarding do-it-yourself practice or even just research so far. To some, it might indeed prove invaluable. Yes, as the title says, it only applies to disasters and being ready in regards of stockpiles, as well as planning ahead and being able to make some improvisations for sheltering in place. Which is why we'll be coming up with an extension of this topic, as we will be diving into the fascinating world of the crisis resilient home, which even includes inflation to a certain amount. A guide that presents innovative ideas for construction homes which strive to be practical, as well as environmentally friendly at the same time. Yet for now, we thank you for your attention. Please make sure to subscribe, and we'll be happy to see you back in part 2. This concludes my elaborations.
Now, good night, and if there's an apocalypse, good luck.